Hello, everyone.
Good morning.
Hi, morning. So our two speakers are actually here. We're just waiting maybe for a minute or two.
Good morning.
Art, Bobby.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, all right. I think we can start.
Sure.
We're just waiting for Bob. Oh, it's nice to see everyone. So we have representatives from where? Cebu, Boracay, Bohol, of course, Manila. We just wait for Bob. Anyway, so how's everyone? When we start, we kind of have to mute everyone, no? But how's everyone so far? So for people from Boracay, do we have people from Boracay? Coast, I see Coast. I see Movenpick. And also what people from Cebu? DTA, how are you there?
Cyndy, all good in Cebu. Just very quiet at the moment since we're still on GCQ.
Yeah.
For the three main cities when the province is in the MGCQ.
Okay. And we also have Sebastian here. Sebastian is the head for operations for Hop In. I mean, Aeron Group basically, but they also have investments here in the Philippines. How is it in Bangkok, Sebastian?
Good morning. It's good. It was raining this morning, but everything okay so far.
We're trying to see like if the rain and the sunshine and the humidity can actually get rid of the virus, right?
Yeah, so it's a good thing, right?
Okay. All right. Okay. Mikel from Tagaytay. How are you there, Mikel?
Good morning. We are okay. We are great here in Tagaytay.
Oh, okay. So we're looking at is it I think if we're on what GCQ, people can't travel yet, right? Not yet. No, you have to. Everyone has to wait for MGCQ. I see Atticus there. Hello, Atticus. How's Angie?
Hi. Yes.
Oh, hi.
She's in LA now.
Yeah, I know. I see her. So
stuck in LA, stranded,
yeah.
trying to find a way home.
Okay. Oh God, really?
Yes.
I have a friend who's stuck in Finland, and she's trying to get back as well. Yeah, but we should. I'll get your number later on. I really want to be in touch, or maybe you can put it on the chat group, or send me a private message.
Sure thing.
Okay, so
cool.
We're just waiting for Bob. We did a bit of a practice earlier, but those who are actually here, I'll probably have to discuss about housekeeping rules. When we start, please keep yourself muted. Turn off. Well, you can turn on the video. It's okay, but ideally, I think for now we'll just turn off the video because it takes a lot of the bandwidth, and we'd like to. And with the intermittent connection, we want to be able to, not to have a slowdown, so for our speakers, if you lose us, if you kind of lose the connection, quickly jump in. If your phone, try to put your phone on. If you have 5G, go on 5G, and we can actually talk to you on the phone. This is also a recorded session, so for those who have missed it, we'll try our best to send it out to everyone. I mean, I would like to probably say this is not really I wouldn't say this is a webinar. I think everyone is so tired of the webinar these days. We will try to do our best to, yeah, I know I'm like so tired of the webinars, but we will try our best to have a good 35 minutes of Q&A later on. We will try our best to answer all questions. I've actually put together some questions that was sent to me earlier. However, what we'll work on is we'll try. Once the Q&A is starting, what we'll do is we'll try to focus on people's asking, so it's a bit more interactive for everyone, so you don't feel like you're just part of the audience. What we want is for you to get engaged and to really talk and ask your questions directly to our speakers. If you also want to ask me, or you just feel free to do so, because I pretty much also have some insights coming from other operators and also some owners. So maybe we'll start. I'm sure Bobby will join us shortly. So hello Bobby.
Hi, how are you?
Okay. All right. So, okay, so this is pretty much a closed group. Good morning. This is Restarting Philippine Tourism. We are on the second day of GCQ. So every move we make is positive to everyone. So let me give you an introduction of Hot Group. Hot Group is pretty much a closed group. It's focused on hotel owners primarily, and also the key heads of their operations. But it's a very informal private group organized to provide accurate and on-the-spot news and updates about tourism and hospitality here in the Philippines and also in Asia Pacific. It's a good thing that we are also in touch with other of our colleagues around Asia. So it's, whenever I get any of the feeds, we share it in this group. So we have like a little over than 100 people on Hot right now. So for those who are not into it, we'd like to keep it first on owners and key operators first, but later on maybe come up in another group to expand it. Since the lockdown, due to the pandemic, a lot of new and new regulations and a lot of new changes are happening every day. So I guess what we want is to, tomorrow seems to be a brighter tomorrow, and that's the reason why we are all here, because our future in hospitality needs to be secured. We don't work. I would always say we don't work like a vacuum. If we're frozen, other industries are also affected. I'm a strong believer that we have, not only from the transportation system, meaning, the ferries, and also the tricycle drivers, and even the boatmen. Everyone's, you also have our food and beverage suppliers that are also on hold. So we need more than ever to really connect. I think in one of my discussion with Art, there are about 13,000, if I'm not mistaken, accommodation establishments who are not also, and only about 2,000 are registered or are accredited by DOT. So if you're looking at the real issues, it's really a major issue. That's happening in our industry, both in the tourism and hospitality. There's a lot of islands who rely on tourism livelihood. So if you look at the total spectrum, we're really one of the worst hit in this pandemic. And the extended lockdown, which is, I believe, one of the longest, doesn't also, help. And we also have to mitigate all these with LGU. And I do understand the LGU in terms of how they want to control and just make sure that it doesn't happen in their own islands. But we also have to slowly transition into focusing into our tourism economy. So today, one thing good is that we were able to sequester time with Art Boncato, our USEC in DOT. Hello, Art. And also Bobby Lim. So we'll start with Art. So Art also have just released a newly approved DOT regulations. How this actually impacts our, so he'll discuss about how this impacts our reopening and also our service standards. And I'm sure he will be able to answer and bridge some of your concerns. So on to you, Art.
Yes, thank you very much, Cyndy, and to my fellow resource person, Bobby, and to all of everybody joining this meeting. It's not a webinar. Thank you for defining that. Maybe I'll just start. Thank you very much for setting the tone, Cyndy. and maybe just start off with that piece of information that you shared about the accredited accommodation enterprises in the Philippines. Although, based on our survey, over 12,000, close to 13,000 are actually licensed by LGUs, but only about 2,000 are actually inspected and accredited by the Department of Tourism. But one interesting fact about that is that of the 2,000, that would more or less be close to 50% already of total inventory of rooms. So that means the accommodation enterprises with a good number of rooms are actually monitored and regulated, while the rest are really the small ones clustered. So, but be that as it may, it's still a responsibility to have them meet standards and to accredit them. So I'll start my sharing. I prepared some with 5 slides. I don't know if you can see the slides, the first slide.
Yes, we can, Art.
Yes, maybe just to put a little context on how the DOT is actually behaving during the COVID. It's really also influenced by certain government issuances. The biggest issuance would be Bayanihan to Heal as one act that gives the president like a authority to really direct establishments to help in the containment of COVID. And we've also received further instructions from the Office of the President to actually create guidelines for primarily for accommodation enterprises to help in housing OFWs, overseas Filipino and workers of essential industries, allowed to operate during ECQ. And overall, the mandate of the DOT really comes from the Tourism Act of 2009, and we are really allowed by law to create regulations in line with the national government's directives. And of course, you already know about the IATF for the management of emerging infectious diseases. It was created in the previous administration, but activated during this time. And the latest omnibus guidelines is some parts are being updated as of now, but the basic set was issued May 15, and that really describes the quarantine classifications we currently have. So from ECQ, there was MECQ, from GCQ, a modified GCQ before we reach the new normal, and are also guided by certain issuances, like the Department of Health, pertaining to minimum health standards that we must accomplish. Now, very quickly as to how the DOT has been moving since March, we were actually focused on assisting stranded tourists, both foreign and domestic. So as of yesterday, we've already reached more than 27,000 assisted in terms of foreign and close to 9,400 in terms of domestic. But we've also assisted in many ways, in the movement of travelers stranded all over the Philippines. In fact, we have counted a total of 931 missions that we have coordinated either by land, by boat, or by plane. But the DOT has invested its funds also in staging sweeper flights, 20 sweeper flights for foreign stranded, and 8 sweeper flights for domestic. We've also closely coordinated with the Department of Labor so that those who are needing assistance in terms of subsidy were able to, in fact, we were able to receive 215 applications and then assisted more than 13,000 individuals taking part of the Tupad and Camp program of the DOLE. So the total value extended by DOLE to this sector is around 51 million. We've been extending like basic kits, sanitation kits, close to 20,000 kits already. And we've extended food and accommodation vouchers to stranded domestic tourists. Close to around 1,200 of them receive vouchers from us. And of course, we have a 24/7 response team to talk to everybody who wish to seek guidance. Also tapped with IATF to open hotels nationwide. As of today, about 1,096 hotels have been open nationwide with more than 69,000 rooms, and 56,000 of which are found in Metro Manila. In fact, 528 hotels as we speak are open and accommodating OFWs, OFs, essential industries, workers of essential industries like BPOs, banks, and health facilities. And we have identified hotels that are ready for quarantining OFWs nationwide. Even the non-accredited, in fact, close to 1,000 non-accredited accommodation facilities have assisted us. We've also, the DOF, BIR, SSS initiated small wage subsidy program already has impacted on over 600,000 workers in the tourism industry. They've received at least 5,000 pesos assistance. And we've also rolled out our tourism online learning platform, not only within the DOT, but within the attached agencies like the Tourism Promotions Board, the Intramuros Administration. Collectively, we've had more than 1 million reactions and reach already, and even presence of learners during those sessions. And lastly, or second to the last, would be as part of Forward, the DOT is currently crafting, finishing the tourism response and recovery program that would look at extension of access to credit for stakeholders, investment for marketing and promotions when we do new normal and MGCQ, and capacity building for livelihood opportunities. And you mentioned about our standards. We rolled out our first set of new health and safety guidelines for accommodation enterprises, but we'll be issuing for all primary enterprises to include tourist transport, travel and tour operations, tour guides, MICE facilities, even restaurants. So restaurants are considered secondary tourism enterprise and not mandated by law to be accredited, but we're also rolling out together with DTI is set of standards for restaurants. But there are 10 common themes and 10 new norms that we are looking at. It's really ranging from the mandatory use of PPEs to contactless transactions. And it's exactly what you see on the screen. This is going to be our new, it's exactly what is indicated in the set of standards we initially rolled out. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you, Art.
Yeah.
So I bring you to our next speaker. So the Attorney Bobby Lim actually heads up the ACAP, or Asia Carrier Association of the Philippines. So he'll give us an update on the airline industry, especially the domestic flights, what to expect and maybe what not to expect, safety protocols, routes planned, and how is this coordinated also with LGU. So I don't know if it's you, Bobby, or Art later on, especially in key areas of destination. I would always say you have what you call the green zones, and maybe that's something you want to take on also, Bob.
Yeah.
So on to you, Bobby.
Yeah, okay. So just as an update, so I think our lift-off point is that our status right now in Metro Manila is GCQ. So that means we are still in quarantine status. There is still some restriction of movement. That is based on the omnibus rules issued by IATF. And that's, I think, how we should appreciate the rules. Now, we know that when Metro Manila or any area is placed under GCQ, there is a relaxation of movement, and interzonal movement of people is allowed. And that is why the airline industry started liaising with the civil aviation authorities 2 weeks ago, so that we could have some clarity on how to actually execute a resumption of domestic flights on June 1. And bottom line, what we did was we submitted the proposed schedule of flights in the domestic sector to the civil aviation authorities, and they in turn gave it to the IATF for approval, because all flights, all movements should be approved by IATF. We should understand that what drives the IATF is public health, security, and close coordination with the LGUs. The expectation of the civil aviation authorities, the Department of Transportation, and the airline industry was, we could start in June 1, but I think there are many LGUs who are closer to the ground and who better represent the communities, who felt that their communities, their cities, their provinces were not ready to have passenger air transport. So we respect that. The IATF, as of today, is still studying our proposed schedule. But the good thing about it is the government has identified some LGUs who are willing to accept passenger flights. So I'd like to share them with you so everybody would have an idea of which cities and provinces these are. No? So Camiguin is willing to accept, Laguindingan, which is in Cagayan de Oro, General Santos, Botuan, Marinduque, Romblon, San Jose, Legazpi Airport, Antique Airport, Siquijor, Tacloban, Dipolog, Tagadian, Sanga-Sanga in Tawi-Tawi, Zamboanga, Manila, and Clark. So this is a summary as of yesterday, no? As of yesterday. So
Excuse me, Bobby. Would
yes?
you have like I'm sure you'll share the presentation to the group later.
Yeah, I can provide this later.
Okay.
So the point is, there are some LGUs of some cities that are prepared. So the missing link right now is to get the IATF to approve the proposed routes and frequencies of flights in the domestic sector by the ACAP carriers. So that's where we are right now. Hopefully this week we get more clarity. I think the important message that we communicated to government was that the airline industry is ready to fly in terms of pilots, cabin crew, in terms of compliance with the safety protocols. No? That is required by the Department of Health, Department of Transportation, and international standards. So that's it. For domestic sector, we're ready. Now, there have been questions that have arisen. When you fly from Manila to any of these destinations, what documentation is needed? So under the omnibus rules, based on our reading, as long as the purpose of your travel is not for leisure, you will be allowed to travel. It's very clear. That's why I go back to what I said earlier. We are still in quarantine. All areas in the Philippines is still under quarantine. They have simply been relaxed. And in fact, we should be conscious that this invisible foe is still very much around. So we should really be careful. The mandatory wearing of masks, the social distancing, all of these safety habits are still very much in place. So we believe that if your trip is for a business purpose, all you need to do is present your ID. We will ask passengers to accomplish a declaration that the purpose of your trip is not for leisure, but for business purposes. We need to elicit that declaration from the passenger at online. If it's online, If you already have your ticket, then we will have to elicit that at the airport. You know? Our preferred mode of securing this quarantine is, of course, at point of sale, so that it is contactless. That is the new norm that the airline industry is pursuing. We want it online. There are some people who have asked, is it necessary to have a travel pass? Now, the travel pass is the document that is issued by the LGU COVID task force. We believe the travel pass was issued pursuant to a Department of Interior and Local Government memorandum. It was issued early May for the purpose of dealing with what you call the unintended consequences of an ECQ, because there would be locally stranded individuals and there would be OFWs that are stranded and they need to travel for specific reasons. And you needed to get a travel pass in order to travel from one province to the other. So we believe that requirement under a GCQ to a GCQ or a GCQ to a GCQ is no longer needed. You don't need a travel pass. Otherwise, you would still be on an ECQ mode, right? The whole point of moving progressively on a relaxed mode is to loosen up travel also, no? But limit it to official and business travel. And we believe you don't need a travel pass. You don't need to secure that from the LGU COVID task force from your point of origin. So that's what we feel. Now, these are the things that we hope IATF will clarify. It's important that IATF clarifies so that when the passengers arrive in the point of destination, we don't want them to be inconvenienced by being subjected to a 14-day quarantine or some other travel restrictions. Okay. So, but I think we are near in having all of this clarified, because the people, the riding public, wants to move around the islands. The airlines want to fly. And although tourism and leisure travel is not yet allowed, there's a big travel which is not tourism related. It's related to business. It could be a salesman selling medicine. It could be an engineer needing to maintain a factory. There's so many business national related activities that need domestic travel. Yes. And that is indispensable to restart the economy.
Yeah, I agree.
That's where we are right now. That's the update that I can share with you.
Actually, I agree with you, Bobby. I think when people say travelers, not all the travelers are leisure motivated. A lot are pretty much business. And that's a huge component of, say, what the domestic travelers are. No? So even if we look at the tourist numbers, tourist numbers does not necessarily mean people just travel for visiting new places. It has a lot to do with businesses as well. But maybe going straight to the Q&A now. For those who have just joined us, ideally if you can. Okay, so we'll tackle the initial questions that I received, and we can go for, we can actually invite you to also join the Q&A later. So I think it becomes more interactive. So we were talking about IATF. So this is a question to both our speakers, to Bob and Art. If you look at IATF, so is there one single body that coordinates with them, or ACAP coordinates, DOT coordinates, LGU coordinates, and even if it's, and the second one, follow-up question is that even if IATF now identifies, let's say, the rules and regulations, LGU also have their own rules and regulations. It's pretty much confusing for the industry. So the first question is there one single body that coordinates all these?
So maybe I'll just explain the way it's structured. Initially, ITF was put together to be a policy-giving body, but for the first several weeks, there was no group in charge of operations until the National Task Force was created, headed by Secretary Galvez. So now the role of the ITF primarily, where all of, if not all of the cabinet members or most of cabinet members are members of now, are dealing with policy directions. That's why we're able to define the omnibus guidelines, and the rollout of such is given to the National Task Force. So the team of Secretary Galvez moving around talking to LGUs. And the role of the respective agencies, like the DOT, for instance, we input as to what the tourism sector really needs from the IATF, like standards, for instance. There are standards that we wish to be noted or even concurred by the IATF. We elevate it to that level. Even hosting of sweeper flights, because it is not in our mandate. So we get that kind of permission from the IATF. But when it comes to operations, it's a different group, and they're very much in touch with the local government units. So even if we say within a modified GCQ, the IATF says in policy is that tourism will now be allowed with 50% operational capacity. But if the local government thinks that it is not ready to open tourism for many reasons, and one major reason that we've noticed is that many of them are not equipped with really primary care utilities, facilities, and they would want to strengthen the protocols first before allowing visitors. Case in point is Siargao. I spoke to Governor Matugas last Sunday. On the same day, they issued that they can only allow flights to come in end of August or early September because they want to prepare. And yesterday they revised their executive order to make it more stringent, that they can only allow tourists to board the plane from wherever they're coming from, provided they show a negative result of a swab test within a 5-day period. So it's how stringent it is. The message really is that they want to be sure that they're able to respond to any outbreak if it ever happens in a destination. That is only one example. So that's my shortest answer possible to your question. So there policy, and then there's operations, and then LGU decisions are really matter when it comes to reopening at this point. Thank you. And of course, we require, under quarantine, the DOT requires a certificate of authority to operate, because we need to monitor them and ensure that minimum health standards are in place. And that Bob is correct, is that even under quarantine, hotels actually accept travelers coming from workers of industries allowed to operate. If you're somebody coming from industry allowed to operate and you need to travel from GCQ to GCQ, that is allowed. And a hotel is also allowed to accommodate them. Thank you.
Okay. I'll have to get back to you on 2 questions on that, Art. Bob, if it's the same, how is your process in terms of getting the airlifts, flying to a new destination? How do you coordinate now with AITF? You do have, in your group, you have the major airlines like Philippine Airlines, Cebu Pacific, Air Asia. Is all that is all coordinated through your office?
Now, it's the individual airlines submit this to Civil Aeronautics Board, Civil Aviation Authority in the standard way. You submit your schedules, and have them approve it. The additional step during this quarantine period is that all of these schedules are also submitted to the IATF by the Department of Transportation. And the reason for that is that the IATF will pass judgment on the destinations, because they have their own health and security assessment on whether these destinations are safe in terms of their criteria. Second, in IATF, the Department of Interior is also represented. They have general supervision and coordinate with the LGUs nationwide. So they also coordinate with the different LGUs regarding the comfort level of the governors and the mayors. And mind you, each region has its own regional IATF. Huh? So there is that structure. You have one IATF central office and then regional IATFs to help coordinate IATF policies. So there's a lot of dialogue ongoing behind the scenes, finding out whether a province or city is ready to accept air transport, sea transport, or even land transport, no? Because of the Maritime National Highway, you can travel now by land from Manila to Davao.
But one of the things, Bob, I also recognize that I was checking practically almost every day in terms of flights. So first they say, okay, by June, parang June 1, there are already flights that are about to start, tapos postponed na naman. So, I mean, and I noticed that, even, not only the airlines, but also hotels, we already started opening or booking engines. Although, of course, there's a more relaxed rule on cancellations. It's just that I guess we need, specific schedules, because I do understand that the approach now is just reacting on situation, and day-to-day things actually do change, and they're probably this is like an interim normal for all of us. I'm still in a denial situation of the new normal. So I'm looking at it more as interim normal first until things really do normalize as to what we expect. But I'll have to go through straight to the questions before I turn it to the audience. So this is for Art. There's something in the regulations that was sent out. When you mean operational capacity, do you mean 50% of workforce coming in place, because that's specifically what was written, or are you looking at 50% occupancy as in guests or room capacity?
Yeah, we're really focused on and of course the language and the guidelines of the IATF pertaining to industry is all about workforce, because remember, we're trying to contain the spread of the disease. That's why we're trying to regulate the movement of people. So it's really anchored on that. So when I say 50% operational capacity, it's 50% of the workforce allowed, because we're also assuming that certain work structures have been changed, like work from home would be a new norm, and shifting and the like, in order to accomplish social distancing and the like, all those minimum health standards. So that is where we're coming from, because of course there's no this is with no prejudice to those who have opened during ECQ enjoying 90% occupancy, because they were really given the certification to operate and following minimum health standards, and really enjoying occupancy which is more than 50%. So bottom line is that if you think you can fully operate a hotel with 50% workforce, then well and good. If not,
Okay, that's
then we leave it to the property. Yeah.
Okay, so the other one, when you say, well, yes, you did allow something like almost 1,000 hotels to operate, primarily to accommodate the OFWs and also the BPOs, no? But we are in a transition, so the BPOs also cannot afford to house all their employees. So eventually, because of the GCQ, people are free to go back to their residence. And also for the OFWs, I think you've already sent out like 22,000 already. So we see occupancy also going down, and so my next question is that when there's about over 2,000 accredited establishments, how many of these hotels, and if they have to actually send some sort, they have to get a certification from DOT, how many hotels to date, since you have released the regulations, have submitted the request to operate? How many have DOT already accredited or approved for operation?
No, right now, just check with the regional offices earlier. they've received quite a number already. But part of the process, aside from, of course, we have to check if they're accredited. If they're accredited, they have a good record of being compliant. So we talk to them, and then we schedule an inspection. No? And then for those who are not accredited, we're more stringent in terms of getting information and a priority in terms of inspection. I know this is going to be the stress and the responsibilities within the DOT to meet the bounds of the law. For example, ease of doing business and ARTA. No, when applications are submitted, they have to do a turnaround quickly. So those are the things that we are challenged with, but we are finding ways how to make a response. In terms of number, I cannot give you the number now, but in terms of the applications we have received, already almost all regions have received, and we're acting on it, either by acknowledging, checking their documents, and then getting in touch with them. Some teams are out now to do inspections.
Okay, so it should be physical inspection. Hindi siya online.
The initial, of course, our initial desire was to decouple it. We give, of course, non-accredited, they give a self-assessment form, and then we evaluate. But we are just stretching ourselves to make sure that they're also physically inspected, because we're talking about the disease. If God forbid something happens by the time they have not been inspected yet, then that also reflects on how we do regulation. So we're striking a balance. It's either, in fact, before this meeting, we had a long meeting with our team looking at the ways on how to do it, either doing random testing, issuance of cow first, and then for accredited, and then follow to inspection, random testing, and or selected testing, etc., or engage the LGUs to help us. So this is something new, and this is something urgent, and we have not done before. So we're learning in the process.
Maybe I don't know. May I just suggest that maybe it would be good to have like a video inspection kind of thing, but at least to actually see, because I think first the travel, no, although there's less traffic, but eventually when we go to MGCQ, so we have pretty much like 2 weeks to get in to get our motor running. I'm not also like, I really wanna, like, I'll probably be the first to jump on the plane once everything is okay. But anyway, so back to you, Bobby. There's a question here.
Yes.
When do you think international flights will resume?
Okay. Well, first of all, there's a big factor there that is outside of the control of the airlines, which is the individual policies of the foreign countries that have, at the moment, still have travel bans or restrictions. In the case of Japan, for example, they've canceled all visas. So I'm not aware of any developments there. So those travel restrictions and bans really inhibit the ability of our carriers to fly. No. Second, there is, of course, a local policy of the IATF that the travel of Filipinos abroad is also being restricted for their own safety, except, again, there are exceptions. If it is for work, if you're an OFW. But again, even with those exceptions, it is always subject to that foreign destination rules allowing foreigners to come in.
Yeah, there has been some recommendations. Let's say for green zones, so zones, when they allow also their their borders to be open. Take for instance Boracay, Bohol, Siargao, where there's either no COVID or the least number of COVID infections. So there's been recommendations also from airlifts. Now, what if they can travel directly to the islands? So those are things that has to be looked into as well. So, but if I can go through the Q&A now, I think
Cyndy, may I just share? I just got a report that the IATF has approved domestic flights. In other words, it has approved the schedule of flights submitted by the carriers. subject to the LGU approving it also. So in principle, the flight schedule submitted by the carriers last week is deemed approved. But in respect of the LGU communities, we just need to double check with them whether it's okay for us to fly. Earlier, I identified to you some of the cities that are prepared to accept domestic flights, such as Tacloban, no? Camiguin, Maguindingan. So it's very symbolic that in in Mindanao, at least we have one destination, Maguindingan. And
Okay.
in Visayas, we have Tacloban, no?
Okay.
Because that brings domestic travel, not for leisure, domestic travel, not for leisure, closer, no, to their point destinations in the other islands.
So I think the key lang right now is really to communicate it also to everyone in the hospitality industry.
Yes.
We will do our best to also communicate that. Sige, so I think we have a question here in the chat. Hanky of Henry Hotel, maybe you can unmute and ask your question. I mean, again, it's an interactive group. This is not a webinar, by the way, so you can actually ask. I'm sorry, before we go to that, the two speakers, we would please share me your presentation so I can also share it to the group, to the hot group. So hot group is hotel owners for tomorrow. So for those who have just joined us, if I don't have your number, I mean, it's a very close group. Please send me a private message now in the chat group, and I'll make sure to also include you. So this is specifically for hotel owners and key operators. So, Hanky, would you want to ask your question?
Yeah. Hi, Art. Good afternoon. Good morning. I just wanted to. I think you responded already about the TRRP, right? So,
Yes.
So the TRRP is, if I could clarify lang what I understood. So the TRRP is included in the various stimulus bills that are filed in Congress right now. Is it like there's a create plan? Is it so? That's part of it also.
Actually, the TRRP. The TRRP is the plan of the Department of Tourism, and part of it is really finding ways that the stakeholders can access in terms of credit, and that is why we are also linked and a major supporter of the economic stimulus bills that started in the House, and there's a version in the Senate. That also provides a certain amount for the tourism sector, and that bill really proposes that the DOT take some sort of leadership role in terms of administering the said funds. So that is the linkage, and it's part of the plan. But the plan is larger. Of course, it covers marketing, promotions, covers capacity building and the like, and not all sources are from what the bill will offer. But it's directly linked somehow. But the plan is the DOT plan, and we're just supporting the economic stimulus bills, including tourism.
So Art, but none of them have been approved yet. So they're just still, Congress is still deliberating on that.
Yes, I just read in our Viber group this morning. It's for the third reading already, the one in the House. So it's moving as fast as we're visioning it. Yes.
Okay. Thank you for your service, Art, for the industry. I mean, we need to be not together in this talaga.
Yes, sir. We are. Yeah, we have to be together. No other way. Yeah. Thank you.
I'm just reading what is on the chat now. There's a comment from Mr. Garcia, Monchu Garcia. Monchu, if you're with us, maybe you want to make a comment or
Sure.
the question.
Thank you. Sure, thank you. I'm Monchu Garcia, resort in Palawan. Just a quick backgrounder. I'm a little familiar with the tourism industry in Spain. I'm new in tourism in the Philippines. And one of the things that really boosted Spanish tourism is domestic tourism. I think we all know that our foreign tourism arrivals are really going to be non-existent over the next 6 to 12 months. and we will all be depending on domestic tourism. I'm wondering if the DOT is really focusing on domestic tourism and seeing how we can boost this, knowing that we have 110 million potential customers if it was done right. Thanks.
Yes, you are correct, sir. In fact, in the TRRP, the recovery plan, domestic tourism really is identified as going to be the catalyst for restarting tourism towards a new normal. And it is really the priority of the department to invest in this. But as you must have heard earlier, we are also going through certain processes, like working directly with the local government units, because we can only be successful if we have the local government units on our side. And part of our build confidence is really the rollout of our standards, and so that all tourism enterprises, primarily accommodation enterprises, follow minimum health standards, so that the LGU can now actually also work with us in reopening destinations.
Yeah, thank you, and respectfully, I understand that the need to put these essential policies in place, and they're actually a great guide for most of us who don't know really what to do and what to follow. But a plan really for developing domestic tourism has to be long-term. Are there any pillars that the DOT will be banking their plan on for the next, I'm talking the next 5 to 10 years? Because obviously, domestic, if you're familiar with Spain, domestic tourism is what actually drove the entrepreneurship in building up resorts, etc. And that's when the foreign tourists came. So this could actually be a great platform, stepping stone, call it what you may, for the Philippines to be able to level up and catch up with many of our neighbors, especially having 110 million population.
Yeah, I agree 100%, sir. And then it's really a strategic plan in growing domestic tourism. I just mentioned some major concerns that we're dealing with right now, but it's going to be the priority of the department. Yes, I agree. In fact, 111 million trips were made by Filipinos in 2018. And domestic tourism is really the backbone of the industry. But 3.3 trillion in terms of total spend, including indirect industries like airlines, for instance. So it's something that can stir, of course, the economy, and we are on it, sir. And then once that overall plan is firmed up, it's already in place, but we're of course being adjusted according to the effects of the crisis. But once that is ready, most definitely it will be shared with all of the stakeholders. Thank you.
There's another question here by about visa. This is coming from FD1. I don't know who FD1 is.
It's DTA.
Yes.
DTA.
DTA.
Yeah.
Okay, DTA, on to you.
No, I was wondering, I believe the visa ban is still in place. Is there any timeline to lift it, or need for foreigners stranded abroad, foreigners who have basically a resident visa or work visa in the Philippines?
Well, of course, the temporary ban on visa issuance is really headed by, or it's really an act made by the Department of Foreign Affairs, and that is something that the IATF has not really discussed as of yet. So, in fact, the meetings this past week is really focused on still focus on quarantine and how we are adjusting to the slow upgrade from ECQ, from MECQ to GCQ, GCQ to MGCQ. So the focus is still there. But as soon as information is available, we shall inform. And I'm sure it will be announced by either the office of the president or the president himself or the spokesperson.
Okay, Art. We're talking about, say, quarantines right now, but I'm not sure if we're the only country that actually has curfew. Everyone's kind of focused on the quarantine, but I'm also quite focused on the, the curfew. So right now we can actually go out hanggang 10 o'clock, right? But will that also get relaxed soon?
Oh, of course, the intention is to bring everybody to a new normal. So from GCQ to MGCQ, and then new normal is, back to normal, except it's new, something like that. So,
yeah, I've never been a strong believer of this new normal. I mean, the changes, I think we will have new practices, but our behaviors will still be the same in terms of traveling, connecting with people, and so on, right? And obviously, I think that the temperature check will be there, maybe face mask to people who's a little bit more conscious and so on. But the curfew is a bit... And I think I mentioned earlier as well, we don't work like a vacuum. I mean, with our industries also affected. I'm just really concerned about, let's say, island destinations where there's a lot of this tourism. It's really a tourism livelihood. Like you have, say, Siargao and Boracay and, all these other areas as well. Those are the things that I'm really very concerned about. And I know that the LGU is also concerned in terms of, health risks and trying to control it as much as possible. But it's also kind of controlling livelihood of people who also wants to start. And the other part also, I mean, we've done several surveys in the past, the past few weeks, no? It's kind of, it just feels a week is like a month now. So like China is definitely interested. You do have, not only domestic travelers, not only the millennials, or people who's really, major high risk in terms of, I wouldn't say high risk, people who have, more like a higher risk of not because of adventure, but people like myself, for instance, I have to travel primarily because of business. So I am in a position where I have to. So I hope they just relax it a little bit more.
Yeah, I agree. But I agree with your statement that it's because of these upgrades to GCQ, MGCQ. The way we deal with the situation will also lead to more decisions to further relax it now. So it's really anchored on how we contain the virus and how we behave in terms of the easing of the quarantine. So that's the only way. And then I believe it's going to be a dynamic development because things will follow, like how tourism grows also. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question here. I think we have only a couple more minutes left now. So to you, Sec Boncato, your slide indicated that 1,241 establishments have been identified for accommodation requirements for COVID-19 purposes nationwide. Breakdown is 1,096 hotels and 145 others. What would the 145 be made out of?
These are establishments identified by the local government units, like for example, the World Trade Center or the Philippine Arena. These are not hotels, but have been converted to house those needing quarantine.
So how about Airbnb accommodation? How will that be handled by DOT?
Because to start with, many Airbnbs are not really licensed by local government units. Therefore, they're not part of our domain, And we are, in fact, even before COVID, we've already started moves to see how we can somehow impact on them in terms of regulation. But that requires working with many government agencies, especially those involved in housing, because many of these Airbnbs are really homes and condominium units. And in terms of regulation, it falls under a different agency. And we have to deal with the local government units in the DILG, making sure that they run after them and make them licensed entities. Then we start the process. So it's moving. In fact, when I spoke to another group, I said we will moving forward, but it requires even a legislation. Like Senator Gordon, during our budget hearing last year, was saying, he can help us come out with legislation pertaining to Airbnb. Yeah, as
because,
part
like,
of the industry. Yeah.
that's true, because like there are strict protocols when it comes to legitimate establishments, and if you give, if the Airbnb can actually be ahead of us, I mean that's pretty much quite concerning, because we're not sure on how they do their safety protocols. So maybe on to the next MICE market. In the regulations that you sent out, for conferences, we can take in as much as 50% as well, or of course people will also be looking at safety protocols, so can the conference market start as well?
No, we haven't rolled out a standard, but if you look at the IATF guidelines, at this point, mass gathering is still not allowed, and it's only a maximum of 10 individuals. So definitely we cannot do MICE activities at this point. Not even religious activities like masses and worship, given the numbers involved. Yeah.
Okay, so there's a question here from Coast. I'm not sure if you answered it already. So since the decision to open tourism relies on LGU, in what way does can DOT help, and how can the hotel owners also help? I think that's something quite important. I mean, that's the reason why we have everyone here today.
Yes, of course. The Secretary Bernard Romulo Puyat has been saying this several times, and she always says this, that of course we want tourism to reopen. And like, for example, for Boracay, the provincial government is just checking on they're doing simulations now on how to reopen and how to designate people to make entry protocols really happen. But the local government is also involved. And I would like to bring into the picture the role also of the Boracay Interagency Task Force, because the BIATF has been extended for a year. Therefore, the task force has a huge role in also defining a reopening of the island. Those are, I don't see them complications, but I can see them as like complementary groups that can ensure that Boracay can be one of the safest after we decide when to reopen it. And the provincial government is actually finishing a COVID laboratory, and they said it's going to be done in a month. So they'll be capable of doing swab tests, which is also a good indicator to build confidence for travelers. Yeah.
All right. Maybe some last words before we end the session. Art, do you have any last words to the hotel owners?
Not last words. We'll be talking to you more. But
like what I said, I don't like the webinars. I'd like more of a So there's gonna be a little bit more later. But thank you so much for the time.
Thank you for your time. I know you have a lot of questions. We're pretty accessible, or you can course it to our hot group in WhatsApp, and we'll answer all of your questions. And do not take the standards as something that will punish you. We're here to really build you up. That's what the regulation's all about, for us to be ready for tourism. Yeah, thank you.
Any positive news is good for everyone. That's pretty
Certainly.
much how I'm looking at now. Bob,
Thank
anything for the group?
Well, we hope to resume flying this week. I shared with you a few minutes ago that the IATF, I am informed, has approved the schedule of the airlines, but subject to the LGU approval of those destinations. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and soon enough we will be flying more often to promote domestic travel, in the islands, and international travel also.
Okay. All right. So please send us your presentation so I can share it also to the hot group. To everyone who joined, thank you for your time, and I'll see you in the next work session.
Okay.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Cyndy.
Thank you, Cyndy. Thank you, Bob.
All right. See you, Aki.
See you.
Bye, everybody.